Thank you for tuning in to Macro View Television and welcome to a brand new edition of Taiwan Outlook, the program that presents the different faces and lets you hear the different voices on Taiwan. I'm your host, Rui Guo. As we know, English is a very important tool for communication and for doing business on the worldwide level. But what is the best way to learn English? We'll find out on today's program as we have a conversation with Miss Hsiao-Wei, who's a Taiwanese English teacher that has worked and lived in Europe, in the United States, and also in China. Welcome to our program, Miss Yang.
Hi, I'm Hsiao-Wei 老师.
Okay.
It's great to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. First, please tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you go to school and, where did you work?
All right. So I class myself as a 21st century backpack teacher. So
okay,
I traveled, I left Taiwan when I was around 19. So I went to England. I attended teacher training college. And so before that, I graduated from vocational high school in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. So I had a dream to become a teacher. So at that time, it was mission impossible to become a teacher then. So I went to England out of bravery and a little bit stupidity. Mm-hmm. So with 5,000 pounds in my pocket, I thought I could live with that money forever. So I went to a teacher's college and I completed a 2-year program. And then I taught in England for almost 10 years. So include my study. At that time, was 14 years old together.
In England?
In England. And then I was a primary school teacher back then. And then I also taught at Waldorf School and various settings at that time. Okay. I was explorer of education. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe I could just go to New York and explore not-for-profit. Mm-hmm. So I found a job online. I went for a job interview. I got a job. All in 1 week. So I moved all in 1 week. So I was there for 10 years.
Good. All right. And let me ask you this. And as you explained your education and your career development, you only attained the highest level of education in Taiwan at Jing'o Vocational High School of Commerce in Taipei. Correct. And at the time, like you said, you developed an interest in English, that you wanted to be an English teacher. Mm-hmm. And you went to UK for your bachelor and your master's degrees. And would you please then compare to us, what is the difference, between the educational environment in Taiwan versus that in the UK?
Right. So it's a very broad comparison there.
Of course.
But one thing I realized that when I was in Taiwan, I was a student.
Yes.
When I moved away from Taiwan, I threw myself in this huge mix of education, become an international student. I became a learner.
Good.
So the transition happened was how I could apply what I have learned in classrooms into real life. Okay. So in Taiwan, I didn't have to do that. Mm. I had to just complete the tasks I was given. And in England, I had to quickly apply. So what I have received the knowledge or attended the lectures in the morning, they will arrange teaching practice in the afternoon. So we had to apply immediately. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit like Harry Potter. Okay. The school, like you went to the lecture in the morning, in the afternoon you have to practice your spells.
Okay, all right. And also you have worked in the UK after finished education. Yes. And what is the experience of working there? As you mentioned that you were a primary school teacher. Mm-hmm. I mean, what was the method that you used to educate the young in the UK?
Right. So the first incident, I was the first class ever I walked into my classroom in England. I thought maybe I should call upon my experience back in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. So I had locksteps, so like a lecturing style.
All right.
And I failed that lesson. So I was in great panic. And how could I turn this lesson into a lesson that was recognized in this country, in the UK? Mm-hmm. So then I watched a lot of videos and I realized if you are standing in front of students too long, you will fail.
Okay.
You fail the class. So I thought maybe I could just focus on how I could show the students how to do it, and they show it back to me. So then I moved from a teacher-centered position to a student-centered position.
Okay. All right. After working in the UK for about 10 years, that you went to New York, and you worked for a nonprofit youth education organization called The Door.
Yes.
And why did you pick that organization? And what is the difference between, the education or the school environment in the UK versus the one that you discovered in New York?
That's an excellent question, because what I realized was the school I taught is a not-for-profit organization, but it was actually an alternative school.
Okay.
It was under the Board of Education in New York City, and one of the under the Community Education Department.
All right.
So it was really exciting because I really don't know how to call myself an alternative educator. So what I found out was the students, they were there for high school equivalent diploma. So it's a test. So that indicates to me that indicated that they have been rejected by at least 3 high schools.
Okay.
So by having like the skills I learned from back in England and gave them textbooks and then follow the tasks and then maybe very interactive way of learning, it still wouldn't cut it for these youth because they really didn't want to be in school and they had been frustrated by the school system. So I had to find things outside the box. So the very different way of approaching our students, or even the structure itself, we had to decide when the student can be ready. So there's no, like, once you complete a year, you move out to the 2nd grade. It was not like that.
No.
So some of my students could be ready in 3 months.
Okay.
And some of them would take 4 years to mature. So there were a lot of interesting trainings I had to go to. So I had to really think outside the box. Believe it or not, I have one of the teacher training certificate. It's specialized in entrepreneurship. So I had to teach young people how to become the boss of themselves.
Okay, all right.
So that worked very well, actually.
Of course, it was a challenging task, I can imagine, yes. But Ms. Yang, you have done very well, as you have said, that you travel and work in many different places. Because back in the year of 2010, you were recognized as the Teacher of the Year in the New York Times sponsored English speaker of other languages, and this is a highly unusual recognition. And you were actually the first person of Chinese descent to receive this, recognition. What did it mean to you? And, did that give you added incentives and motivation to try to be the teacher that really offers the kinds of curriculum and teaching methods that people, students will welcome?
It was when New York Times called me up, I thought it was a prank call.
Okay.
So I was saying, "Did you get a wrong number?" Okay. And so they would say they were laughing their heads off, and they were saying, basically, they received overwhelmingly a lot of recommendation letters, and so it was a surprise to them, and also they make that exception for me, for me to accept to be one of the honorees, was due to the fact that the award was for adult educators. So the educators were teaching adults. So I was teaching youths. So at that time, but they thought they could bend the rules for me. Okay. So it was really a surprising outcome. But what I did was, I realized was, my students, they wanted to find a way to thank me. Okay. And my coworkers, they wanted to find a way to appreciate, to show their appreciation. And so that's how the award meant to me. Okay. It was a continuous passion that I should continue, should stay with me forever, and just have these energy I got from my co-workers at that time and the students. So that's why I'm here. They set me off to this travel around the world journey.
Okay, we have about 1 minute. What did the experience of teaching English in New York has taught you, looking back, these years later?
There's no common language in my classroom back in New York City.
Okay.
So in Taiwan, we can have Mandarin Chinese. But then I invented one additional language. It's called doing.
Doing, good.
So I have English and doing. The two, we're bilingual classroom.
Okay, all right. So you actually teach the materials, but ask people to actually do it in the classroom.
Yes.
Okay. Do the students respond to the method well?
Yes, they didn't really know they were learning English. They thought they were operating machines, they learn how to use an iPhone.
Right.
But through that time, they pick up languages, words that I wanted them to learn very quickly.
Good. And Ms. Yang, we have mentioned earlier that you have done very well. Yeah, you have been recognized as one of the leading English teachers in the city of New York. Also, that you have now come back to Taiwan. And some people must be curious. What are some of the teaching techniques or skills that you use to try to get the students interested and be attracted to your classes? And one of such technique that we have learned is so-called magic shortcuts to help students to memorize vocabulary. Can you please elaborate on this concept?
Sure. Okay, since it's called shortcut, it doesn't take a lot of time.
Okay.
So I call a series the way that I wake up in the morning. I found out I will find 3 words a day. So this kind of words around our life, I call them alphabet of life. Okay, so I will begin maybe look at the shape, maybe the legs of the desk or table looks like an N. And then I will start from 3 words related to the table.
Okay.
Begins with N.
All right.
So it could be narrow, could be nice, or a nightstand, So I would not restrict them to a particular group. So for example, maybe it's a noun, an adjective. I would not narrow them down. So the technique I applied here is called the brainstorming and technique. So this technique is used in all sorts of like professional development training and also leadership training, and of course, every single session, when you begin a 21st century skills, you start with brainstorming. So, and then the second thing I would do, connect vocabulary to grammar, I will call the life grammar. So, one of the must-to-know skill, must-learn skill of 21st century is goal setting. So, how will you set up goals? So first, you have to live in the present. And then you have to continue a dream or a task you want to complete in the near future. So this is present continuous. Okay. So I would not like to think grammar is separate from the context in our lives. So in my classroom, there will be goal-setting activity combined with present continuous.
Okay. So this is something that the students respond to very well. I mean, like you said, this is a brainstorming session. Do they participate? Do they respond?
Yes, I do not talk to them in a level that, you don't know the words, so let's move on. So I would encourage them to think, even they don't know how to say it, they can bring and point it out, or Google the images. So like I build that urgency, the bridge, I should say, that they would like to communicate. Okay. So communication is another skill. So I'm trying to kill 2 or 3 birds in one stone, so I will try to build the English skills, one layer, and also 21st century skills. On top of that, leadership skills. And so in 3 or 5 minutes a day, you are engaging yourself in these sets, different sets of skills are will be developed throughout the day.
Okay. And as for your teaching to adult immigrant students in New York, and you try to, help them, by giving them very practical lessons. For example, trying to help them to assimilate in the U.S., they need to open up bank accounts, for example. They need to know what kind of food or meal to order when they get into a restaurant. So you use those everyday examples, life experiences, and teach them what are the important words and phrases to remember so they can live a better quality life as a new immigrant in the U.S. How do you do it?
It was a journey I took also. When I arrived in New York City, I got a job. So I opened a bank account. So I would take the whole journey with my students with me at that time. And then I realized a lot of them couldn't open a bank account. They were underage. So some of them wouldn't have money to deposit. So and a lot of them are depending on the benefit from the government, and some of them are undocumented. And they had to work and to support themselves and their families back home. So then I started exploring how I could get them to have a place to save their money. Then I learned about different banking systems. You know, so there were different types of banks are happening in New York City. There's no physical bank, only online banking. It was beautiful, you know. So I started a whole lesson, just took myself on the journey to learn a lesson about what they needed. So I use backward design. So if my students had to find a job, they must, and they had to be qualified or having a certain license in a certain way. So I put that as my lesson aim. And then that lesson might continue for about 3 months, you know, so it became a curriculum at that time. So then the aim of that lesson is to have my students equipped to work at a restaurant. So what are the license they would be able to get? So I registered myself to learn food handling certification. And I turned that whole program, whole test into a 3-month-long English classes.
Okay, good. So in a sense, you play the role of a student yourself by learning about the different skills and different techniques in the different professions, and also the different areas of life that the new immigrants may be, you know, exposed to. And also we understand that, you know, for example, you may have some students that will, you know, that were working in restaurants or maybe working in machine shops, that you will actually tell them, you know, and try to help them in terms of incorporating their skills, their professional experiences into the curriculum. So, you know, make sure, for example, if somebody works in a restaurant as a waiter, you would tell them about, you know, the ingredients in particular dishes. Then they, you know, if they were asked in the restaurant, they can respond to the customers. So is that the, you know, the thinking and the plan behind the curriculum?
Yes, so lots of English textbooks that we can find on this on the market right now, they are pretty much about ingredients and how to make certain food. But for my students, most of the time they couldn't even cook. So then to build that knowledge and the confidence that to survive is not only the language and also how to feed themselves. And then we have food shopping, so budgeting. So like, again, I connect the entrepreneurship from 21st century skills into the class. So not only we have English class, you're going to talk about the US dollars and then numbers and convert them into different currencies. We also have like, how would you fundraise for yourself if we want to have a party, and then we could cook our own food, and instead of being fed by all the junk food that are out there. So, and offering choices. So then in my class, it doesn't look like an English class anymore. It looks more like, sometimes looks like a restaurant, a corner of a restaurant, or a corner of the kitchen, or a corner of a bookstore. Or even sometimes we will be outside on the street. At the corner, I'll be teaching them the history of between the street of 6th Avenue and Broome Street. And then we look at the buildings, and then we do food tasting tour. So a lot of tourists will stop and then join us. They didn't know we were having a class. So that happened a lot. So it's not a simulation anymore. It's a real situation. So that's what we did.
Okay. We understand that you are now back in Taiwan.
Yes.
You and I were talking during the break that what kind of English classes, or if you don't call it classes, what are the occasions in Taiwan now that you teach students? Because if I find what you do now is very, very interesting, I think our audience will be interested.
Sure. We began our program called English to Go Alone about 3 years now, or 4.
Okay. All right.
So it's an idea of bringing English classes or workshop or skills classes to people, to the learners. And we do not want to be conditioned into 4 walls.
Oh, okay.
So we will meet where the students or learners are.
Okay.
So sometimes they don't even know they want to learn English. So I have this charm. I can make sure that they all want to learn English. So, but a lot of time I would use the things around them. Okay. So I will make English is application. So rather than a subject only. So it's an application that you apply. So you walk into 7-Eleven, believe it or not, a lot of convenience stores, they all have this packaging. On the back, the labelings are all pretty much in English. A lot of the time, they just put a Chinese written, translated into Chinese and put a sticker on, but the English labels are still somewhere there. So I incorporate that into lessons and like how to use pick up materials from a convenience store to make a cupcake in 5 minutes, and it will be purely in English. So it's a way of using a natural approach instead of saying this is an English word you must learn, and more like engage them in conversation. All right. And they figure out what I was talking about.
All right. And one thing I think, Ms. Yang, you have also discovered is that students who are interested in learning English usually don't have the environment, the opportunities to apply their English skills or knowledge they have learned, in classroom or elsewhere. So how do you then, based on your experiences all over the world, how would you then, recommend that we can make the environment a lot more friendly to English users?
Yeah, sure. When I arrived in New York City, I thought, my students, they are exposed into an English environment naturally, but it's really not true. No. A lot of them would stay in their own community. They don't use a word in English in a day. No. And even the MRT, the subways, they are bilingual. A lot of staff members are bilingual. So I was shocked to know that my classroom would be the only place they would practice English with me in New York City. Okay. So I had to make connections. And then I asked them to bring things to me. All right. So they are metro, their newspaper on the subway every day. So it's free. So they will bring them to me. So even I said, just bring it to me. I want to read it. It's not for you to read it. Okay. So I'll be reading the newspaper with them. Okay. And talking about, a little bit like updates, so news update. So they became accustomed to this kind of habit of, I see, that's what Hsiao-Wei has been reading every day. Okay. So I think students in Taiwan is the same. I have students I invited, there's 6 students came from New York City to work on this project with me in Taiwan. All right. So there were 6 of them, they came, and then I gave them different tasks. So one of them will be doing the barter economy. So we advertised through Facebook and invited people, like teachers and everybody anyone who wants to learn with us. But we would exchange with a lesson for, could be accommodation, could be transportation, could be a meal. Okay. So, and then the first stop, we went to a restaurant. It was a stinky tofu place. Okay. So he wanted to find the condiment to go with the stinky tofu. All right. So at that time, we're specializing in salsa sauce. We're really good at making salsa. We're from New York.
Of course.
So a student with me at that time, he's from Puerto Rico. So he's perfect match. So we taught him a lesson in how to make salsa sauce. and he used salsa sauce to go with his stinky tofu dish. Beautiful, right?
Okay, yes.
So that's how we batter through our journey.
Okay.
And also we do flash mob during that time, the year before, I think. And so we did, we will be again using social media and then call the time. And then I will appear at Taipei main station and people would gather together. And for that particular lesson, I asked everybody to bring a textbook with them.
Okay.
So then pick and choose the pages they want. They compile them into a specialized textbook, only tailor-made textbook only for themselves.
All right. But Ms. Yang, you probably have discovered, as I have, that students in Taiwan, they usually have basic level of English competence. And they do well on the tests, and they know the grammar, and then they can write, fairly well. But the problem has always been, traditionally, from the days of our, parents, is that people in Taiwan don't speak English that much. Is it because of, some of them are introverted, a little shy, or is it because of, the sense that they may be laughed at if they don't say the correct English? And how do you then, after coming back and teach English in a very unorthodox ways, and then how do you then help students to overcome that inhibition?
So there are two things I found out about these 4 skills. Okay. So reading and listening are really passive. So people give you information. And then writing and speaking are 2 skills you really need to be active. So you have to think. Yes. So if... it's once I asked for direction in Taipei and approached a couple. I said, how do I get to the nearest subway? And they gave me direction like this. Okay. So then I realized it's not about the language itself. It's giving out direction. Exactly. It was a problem. So then I introduced a layer of thinking. So before you could speak, let's think first. All right. So then that ties very well with critical thinking. But critical thinking could be level 5. Thinking strategy in the classroom, for example, like the 3 words a day, that's the first layer of thinking. So you are not just memorizing words, you are finding words for yourself to remember. So making that connection and that get your brain working, in that sense. So that works really well to build the confidence from the within, rather than say, I need to say something. Yes. That's very external. Yes. So that's how we did it.
Okay. And going back to the concept of English to go, and you operated that concept based on the economic barter system. People exchange for your lessons, in terms of offering goods and services. And how do students locally respond to that? Because they used to, I pay my tuition, I come to an English language training center, and I learn my lesson for the day and go home study. That's how the routine works. But you offer something completely different. And how do they respond? Do they know that this is probably a better way, more effective way for them to learn a new language? Or are they still that, hey, it doesn't cost me anything, so I just go and then, kill an hour along the way? What's their response?
What actually happened was we offer different learning, a choice of learning. So it's like you can learn this way or that way. All right. So I think by providing choices, you are empowering our students to become from students to become learners. Okay. So now I have a choice, and so I could choose. So which one should I choose? And they have to think for themselves. So now also the whole English to go is to connect. So they need to see how I connect with them. So I'm no longer, so I have my nose piercing and I used to have blue hair. So this is to challenge the students. What do you think about me? Right. Am I qualified to be your English teacher? So before I could ask them to think outside the box, I have to present what the box is. Okay. So I am the box for them to think outside. So outside of it. So that's a lot of pain I had to go through.
Yeah, no, of course.
A lot of makeup, you know,
Yes.
so a stage design. But it worked. So they began to challenge themselves about their way of learning.
Okay. And, you know, have you ever thought about maybe sometime in the future that you can sort of try to expand and get more acceptance to your way of teaching English, you know, to not just, you know, in the classroom, but to the general public at large? Did you ever think about doing that?
Yeah, so that's what my main job is focused on in Taiwan, is to spot the alternative learning spaces where the students and the teachers and all the learners can apply the knowledge they have, not only English.
Okay.
So English connects to carpentry, English connects to music, or making a pottery. Okay. So, but that application will only take place when the situation happens. Yes. So then I would do more, maybe like an event. So we do a whole production of food tasting, and then you come up with the food, and they will start charging people per head.
Okay.
So then you begin to see yourself using the skills you already learned to make money.
Okay. All right.
So that's pretty much the destination of our English learning, right?
Okay.
In Taiwan.
Yes, of course.
Get a better job and get more money.
Exactly. And Ms. Yang, we also understand that you have traveled extensively in Europe and also in China. And while you were traveling in those places, that you seem to have a different ways of making accommodation and then make arrangement with the people that you meet. For example, you will offer to cook for them, you know, and then they will offer accommodation and also meals. And is that another way, not just teaching English, you know, to the people that you meet, but also another way for you to make connections with the people locally?
Yes. That project that you mentioned is the one I did. It took me 6 months to travel from New York City to Taiwan. Okay. We did not take an airplane. There's no flying. The whole journey was arranged by my students in the classroom in New York City. Okay. Some of the students, because of the job or the commitment, they could not leave the country. Yeah. So they make an arrangement for me to visit their neighbors, their families back home. Right. So the places I have visited, mainly they are English is not their first language. Okay. So I visited friends. So I went to meet an ex-coworker. She invited us over, and she was an intern back then. So she wanted to show me what she learned from me, and she now had a job, you know. So she has a job and related to, very similar to the work that we did back in New York City. And the students will be making arrangement for their family to put us up, but also for me to deliver a lesson. So it could be sometimes it could be a PowerPoint and to show them our lives in New York City. So it was really very emotional journey for me too. Of
course. And you took 6 months and no flying along the way.
Except one place. We've been deported. So.
No, I mean along the way you meet many different people in different places. Did you discover their reactions or responses to your teaching methods are different also?
I think some places I was more talking about the cultural difference. So the students were in New York City, how their life could be, and then compared to here. So a lot of teaching at that time, especially in China, it was in rural settings. So I've been to schools that there were no, some students couldn't afford shoes. No. You know, so, and the teachers, there would be one teacher assigned to teach English to 700 students.
That's a lot. Yes.
So then my task at that time is she came in to observe my class, and she found that's a lot of preparation to do, you know. Of course. And so then my task at that time became more like how could I support her, you know, by finding the the resources locally or virtually to support her.
Right.
But they do love the way I teach.
Yes,
yeah,
I would imagine. Yes, I wish I had the opportunity of being one of your students. And Hsiao-Wei, we appreciate you sharing all these experiences, teaching English in very, creative and sometimes unorthodox way to students all over the world. But let's talk about one or two projects that are, either happen or, are ongoing. And one of which is back in 2014, that you were, in a project called Circling the Island 5 Times. And this is really trying to help, children in the remote areas in Taiwan to learn English. Please elaborate on the planning and the execution of this initiative, please.
It's more like to the research of my teaching method to inform me what kind of method should I come up with and to assist the education better, the learners better here in Taiwan. So these 5 include, one of them, I didn't really leave my house. I sent out 30 different resumes to 30 different vocational high schools in Taiwan. And I picked 1 or 2 from each county for job interviews, for applying for jobs. And of course, I didn't really travel because there was nobody called me back.
But that happens even to the best of people. Yes.
Yeah, but that's a great experience. I called them up and I asked them why wasn't I called or informed. And also I sent them my books. So you could find my books at all the 30 different schools. But that was something that I wanted to know, like even being qualified and then from overseas, and how would you be valued and be seen in Taiwan? And whether or not we use a lot of foreign teachers, so we have a lot of native speakers. And how can we situate them in the classroom? How do we see them? So that was a very important study for us. So, and we learned a lot from each school, and we went for a couple of job interviews. I went for a couple of job interviews. I learned from the questions they asked me. So that informed me how when I am doing teacher training, what I should prepare my students to have. And that was very helpful. And then, of course, all the other journeys will be one on social enterprises. So we visited small, medium enterprises, social enterprises in Taiwan.
Good.
And so listen to their stories, because that's another thing that I want to connect English education to the international platform. It's solving social issues.
And you mentioned earlier about English mob, flash English mob classroom. And then tell us a little more about that, because I know that takes place in Taipei, main railroad station. And young people are attracted, like you said, through social media to come over and meet with you.
Yes.
And then how are they attracted by this program? I mean, what were their expectations? When they come to Taipei, main station and try to meet up with you, what did they expect at the end of the day to come away from this meeting?
With these unexpected pop-up lessons, I call them, it's based on they heard about my stories, and also read about my book. So if that is something that I'm interested in, I usually take 1 or 2 activities I got from my book and then incorporate them into to kind of incorporate with the environment. So we did actually 3 flash mob lessons in Taipei, and there are 3 different locations. So Taipei City is really, the main station is very vibrant. So we barely could hear each other. So, so we did a lot of physical work. So we tear our textbook apart, we tore them apart, and then we arrange them into a new textbook they would like to have. And they pick and choose from each other's sessions, textbook they brought in. So they became a kind of a upcycling of our textbooks we're about to throw them away. So.
All right. But how many people usually show up at the the meeting, the session? Do you expect 5 or 10 or 15, 20?
No, usually like 30, 40, and sometimes
good.
I had to bring that's why I had my students with me all the time, because there were more than we could handle the numbers.
Right.
And then we don't want to turn them away.
No.
We would,
Okay.
you know, so, and then we will find, there are some teachers, you know, would also join our party. We will assign them a group also. So it's a learning party that I called.
Okay.
You know, so.
And we understand that this year, 2016, you're also doing a new project that is accompanying children in remote villages in New Taipei City. And this is also the motivation, I would suppose, behind the project is to help these students to be interested and to learn. And can you then elaborate on your thinking behind the project?
The focus of this project is actually parents, moms. I want to support moms, stay-at-home moms. Right. They are not only taking care of their own kids, they are taking care of the kids in their village.
Of course.
So they gathered together at the library, and we came up, I trained them. And then a lot of the problems that we have and the challenges we have are facing in either, in both family at home and at school classrooms are the behavior challenging kids, you know. So I would not say they are challenging to a way, but they're bored.
Okay.
You know, so how can we compete, use our textbook to compete with their iPhones? You know, so if our teaching is not updated, or our way of informing our students or kids are not updated, they are constantly bored from us.
Yes.
You know, they want to run away from us. So I engage moms in thinking about creative ideas, and they bring their own skills. So one of the things I am really excited about is I actually use English language teacher training methods to train any mothers or any parents, any adults who has a skill. So maybe origami is their particular skill. Okay. So I train them how to break it down to a degree that how to teach others how to do origami. Okay. But language skills, language teaching methods is brilliant in breaking things down into very small units and small pieces. Yes. So I apply those into those kind of skill-focused teacher training, workshop training situation.
Good. And Ms. Yang, I'm going to ask you something. Maybe somebody asked before, maybe somebody, nobody ever asked. It's the sense that, by listening to you, today on the program, I believe, our viewers, myself included, are very much, touched and also admire your passion and enthusiasm, of teaching English to students all over the world in very creative and also sometimes unorthodox ways. But the fact of the matter remains is, you are still not in the mainstream, okay? Your methods are, of course, maybe welcomed by students. But do you ever experience a time or two when you are just frustrated, when the students do not respond to your teaching methods, or they lack the same kind of passion and enthusiasm that you have exhibited in your classrooms? How do you overcome those, low points?
My best teaching came from frustration, actually. Yes. I have 10 years in New York City. The students I had were incarcerated youth. They had to break. They had this ankle bracelet.
Of course,
I had to call police.
Yes.
And rejected by 3 high schools. How passionate could they be about teaching?
No, of course.
They would often sitting like this, and then check me out.
Their legs up.
And then not looking at me for the entire time. So, but my frustration came from maybe not understanding them so well, and then because of them, I am now a lifelong learner. I find everything exciting. I find everything interesting, and the classroom is a place I share what I am passionate about in my own life to be with them.
All right.
So I don't get tired and frustrated that often.
Good, Hsiao-Wei, and we only have about 1 minute left in the program. Let me ask you something a little more on the personal front, in the sense that you are well trained in the UK. You have had work experiences in, several different continents. And let me ask you this. Looking back on your career, do you ever have any regrets? Because with your skills and experiences, you could have, done very well in business, in international trade or commercial activities. And if nothing else, you'd be, better paid financially. And did you have any regrets that you picked this role and you travel all these years?
I just realized I have all these choices. I didn't know about them before.
So
now you are getting me regretted.
Getting your attention, yes.
No, actually, I don't really have regrets because I have today to make up for my regrets. Things I regret from yesterday.
Oh, okay.
And so I think to become visionary. So, in other words, who is here to say that I'm doing right now is not getting paid, and I might get paid a lot tomorrow.
Okay, yes, indeed. And certainly, like I said, viewers who have watching our program today will certainly be, very much touched and moved by your commitment to the teaching of English. Certainly, I think we will, welcome teachers, like yourself, with the same amount of passion, enthusiasm.
Yes.
I certainly think that will make Taiwan's English education and curriculum a lot more competitive on the regional level at the very least. Thank you very much, Hsiao-Wei, for being a special guest on our program today. Want to wish you all the best in your future personal and professional endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching our program today. I'll see you next time on Macro View Television. Thank you.